Welcome, dear listeners, to a journey into the heart of darkness. Tonight, we delve into a tale that shook a nation, a story whispered in hushed tones, its echoes still resonating through the fabric of American society. This isn't just a story, it's a chilling historical account, a psychological exploration of the depraved, and a testament to the resilience of those who faced unimaginable horror. But before we plunge into the abyss, I have a small favor to ask. If you find yourself captivated by this narrative, if the intricate details and the unfolding drama truly grip you, please consider subscribing to our channel. Your support allows us to continue bringing you these meticulously crafted, immersive stories. Hit that subscribe button, join our community, and let's embark on this unforgettable journey together. Now, without further ado, let the tale unfold. The year was 1988, a time of neon lights and big hair, of economic boom and burgeoning technological promise. Yet, beneath the veneer of American optimism, a sinister undercurrent began to stir in the heartland, specifically in the seemingly idyllic state of Ohio. The first whispers of fear began as isolated incidents, dismissed initially as unfortunate, albeit tragic coincidences. But as the body count rose, a chilling pattern emerged, a specter that would soon cast a long, dark shadow over the entire nation: the Buckeye Ripper. It began subtly, with the disappearance of Sarah Jenkins, a vibrant 22-year-old art student from Columbus. She vanished on a Tuesday evening after leaving a late-night study session at Ohio State University. Her car was found, meticulously parked, near her apartment building, but Sarah was gone, leaving behind only a lingering scent of her lavender perfume and a growing sense of unease. The Columbus Police Department, accustomed to runaways and petty crimes, launched a standard missing person investigation, but without a trace, without a witness, their efforts quickly stalled. Her parents, desperate and heartbroken, plastered missing posters across the city, their faces etched with a grief that would soon become all too familiar to others. 2 weeks later, the body of Michael O'Connell, a 34-year-old financial analyst, was discovered in a secluded wooded area near Dublin, a wealthy suburb north of Columbus. He had been brutally murdered, his body left in a deliberately posed, almost theatrical manner. The cause of death was a single, precise stab wound to the heart, but the most unsettling detail was the intricate, almost artistic arrangement of his personal belongings around his corpse. His wallet, emptied of cash, was placed on his chest, his driver's license carefully positioned on top. His keys were laid out in a symmetrical pattern beside his head. It was a macabre display, a statement rather than a simple act of violence. Detective Robert Miller, a seasoned homicide investigator with 2 decades on the force, was immediately struck by the meticulousness of the crime scene. This wasn't a crime of passion, nor a random act of violence. This was calculated, precise, and deeply disturbing. Miller, a man whose cynicism was tempered by a stubborn sense of justice, felt a cold dread settle in his stomach. He'd seen a lot in his career: the senseless, the brutal, the depraved, but this felt different. The killer had left no fingerprints, no obvious DNA, no spent casings. It was a ghost of a crime, leaving only the horrifying aftermath. The local news channels, initially focusing on the shock of a murder in a quiet community, began to use the word serial with increasing trepidation. The disappearances continued, each one punctuated by a terrifying discovery a week or 2 later. Mary Beth Williams, a high school teacher from Bexley, vanished after a faculty meeting. Her body was found, again in a secluded, wooded area, near Granville, another affluent suburb. Her murder echoed O'Connell's. A single, precise stab wound, and the same chilling arrangement of her personal effects. A small, silver locket, a cherished gift from her mother, was placed delicately over her eyes. The media, no longer able to ignore the horrifying pattern, erupted. Columbus Strangler? Ohio serial killer? The headlines screamed, fueled by a growing public panic. The term Buckeye Ripper emerged from the fertile imagination of a local newspaper reporter, a sensationalist moniker that quickly stuck. It was crude, violent, and instantly recognizable. The city, once buzzing with the mundane rhythms of daily life, was now gripped by an invisible terror. People stopped walking alone at night. Parents kept their children indoors. Neighborhood watch programs sprang up, fueled by a desperate desire for safety in the face of an unseen enemy. Detective Miller and his team, including the ambitious and sharp-witted Detective Sarah Hayes, were working around the clock. Hayes, fresh out of the academy but with a natural aptitude for criminal psychology, quickly became an invaluable asset. She had a knack for seeing connections where others saw only chaos. Their office, usually a hub of organized chaos, was now a maelstrom of whiteboards covered in victim profiles, geographic maps crisscrossed with red string, and overflowing coffee cups. Sleep became a luxury, replaced by the relentless pursuit of a phantom. The victims shared some superficial similarities. They were all seemingly respectable members of society, between the ages of 22 and 40, and lived in or around the greater Columbus area. But beyond that, there was no obvious connection. They weren't from the same social circles, didn't work at the same places, didn't frequent the same bars. The Ripper seemed to choose his victims with a chilling randomness that defied easy categorization. He's not targeting anyone specific, Hayes theorized, pointing to a sprawling map of Columbus. It's almost like he's just selecting opportunities. People who are alone, people who are isolated for a brief moment. Miller grunted, rubbing his temples. But the method, Hayes, the precision, the staging, this isn't just opportunistic. There's a ritual to it. The FBI was called in, a team of behavioral analysis unit agents led by the renowned agent Mark Thompson, a stoic man with an unervingly calm demeanor and a mind like a steel trap. Thompson's arrival was met with a mix of relief and resentment from the local force. Relief because they desperately needed help. Resentment because it felt like an admission of their own inadequacy. Thompson's initial assessment corroborated Miller's instincts. This is an organized killer, he stated in a low, even voice, addressing the assembled task force. Highly intelligent. He plans his attacks meticulously. The staging of the bodies, the removal of specific items, the lack of forensic evidence, it all points to a high level of sophistication and control. He's not leaving anything to chance. He then elaborated on the psychological profile. The precise stab wound to the heart indicates a certain level of intimate violence, a desire to exert ultimate control. But the staging, that's where he communicates. He's not just killing, he's sending a message, to whom we don't yet know. But it's personal. And the lack of sexual assault, while not definitive, suggests that the primary motivation isn't sexual gratification, at least not in the traditional sense. It's about power, dominance, and possibly a dark artistic expression. The victims continued to fall. A young lawyer, a university professor, a homemaker. Each murder more meticulously executed. Each body more artfully displayed. The fear escalated, becoming a palpable entity in the city. The media coverage became a relentless, sensationalized barrage, fueling public anxiety and putting immense pressure on law enforcement. The Buckeye Ripper was no longer just a local problem. He was a national nightmare, a symbol of the fragility of peace in even the most prosperous of communities. The task force focused on every angle, a detailed geographical analysis of the dump sites, a thorough examination of the victims' lives for any hidden connections, and a deep dive into cold cases across the state, hoping for a similar MO. But the Buckeye Ripper remained an enigma, a ghost in the machine, leaving only a trail of devastation and despair. One particularly disturbing detail emerged during the autopsy of Emily Patterson, a 28-year-old librarian. Her right hand, while otherwise untouched, had a single, almost microscopic, shard of dried paint embedded beneath the fingernail. It was a fleck of cadmium red, a vibrant hue. The coroner, Dr. Evelyn Reed, a meticulous woman with a reputation for spotting the smallest anomalies, had noticed it only under extreme magnification. It was an insignificant detail, almost easily missed, yet it was the first tangible clue, however small, they had. Miller held the tiny evidence bag, the speck of paint almost invisible to the naked eye. "Cadmium red," he murmured, his brow furrowed. Artists used that. Painters. Hayes immediately began cross-referencing their geographic data with art studios, galleries, and art schools in the Columbus area. It was a long shot, but it was something. The list was extensive, but it narrowed their focus, however slightly. The pressure on the police department reached a fever pitch. Public outcry demanded answers, arrests, a return to safety. The mayor held increasingly tense press conferences, promising resources, assuring the public that every effort was being made. But behind the closed doors of the task force, frustration was mounting. The Buckeye Ripper seemed untouchable, a phantom who moved through the city at will, leaving a path of terror in his wake. Agent Thompson, ever the pragmatist, reminded them, "He will make a mistake. They always do. Our job is to be there when he does." But the question remained, when would that mistake be? And how many more lives would be lost before the Buckeye Ripper finally slipped up? The clock was ticking, and with each passing day, the shadow of the Buckeye Ripper grew longer, darker, and more terrifying over the unsuspecting heartland of America. The first chapter of this grim saga was drawing to a close, leaving behind a city besieged by fear and a nation gripped by a macabre fascination with the elusive monster in their midst. The hunt was on, but the hunter remained frustratingly unseen, a whisper of dread in the night. The discovery of the cadmium red paint shard, though minute, injected a renewed sense of purpose into the flagging task force. Detective Hayes, with her keen eye for detail, was relentless. She meticulously cross-referenced the list of art establishments with local records of known individuals with violent tendencies or a history of unusual behavior. It was a long, arduous process, yielding countless dead ends and false leads. Yet, she persevered, driven by the faces of the victims, by the grief of their families. Meanwhile, the Buckeye Ripper, seemingly emboldened by his continued evasion, escalated his attacks. The time frame between murders shortened, and the staging of the bodies became increasingly elaborate, almost mocking in their artistic precision. A discarded bouquet of wilting roses meticulously arranged around the head of a victim, a single, antique compass placed perfectly in the palm of another, always pointing north. Each new crime scene was a chilling tableau, a perverse masterpiece of horror. The public, already terrified, was now in a state of near hysteria. The media, feeding on the fear, churned out daily updates, speculative theories, and increasingly graphic descriptions of the crime scenes. Every shadow seemed to harbor a killer, every stranger a potential threat. Businesses suffered as people stayed home, afraid to venture out after dark. The vibrant energy of Columbus was replaced by an eerie quiet, a city holding its breath. One particularly harrowing incident involved the disappearance of Dr. Alan Clark, a respected local historian. His body was found 3 days later, not in a secluded wooded area, but in a prominent public park during daylight hours. His body was posed on a park bench, holding a copy of a local historical text, open to a page detailing the city's founding. A single, pristine white feather was placed on his forehead. The sheer audacity of the act, the disregard for potential witnesses, sent shockwaves through the community. It was a brazen challenge to law enforcement, a taunting display of the Ripper's perceived invincibility. Agent Thompson, his face grim, addressed the task force. "He's escalating. This isn't just about control anymore. It's about spectacle. He wants to be seen, to be acknowledged. He's reveling in the chaos he's creating." Miller, usually stoic, punched a fist into his palm. "Then he's making a mistake. He's getting too cocky." Hayes, however, was focused on the feather. "A white feather," she murmured, tracing the detail in the crime scene photos. Symbolism, purity, cowardice, or something else entirely. She remembered the cadmium red paint, the artistic staging. The feather felt like another brushstroke in a macabre painting. She pulled out a large, detailed map of Columbus and surrounding areas. She began marking the locations of the body dump sites with red pins and the locations of the victims' disappearances with blue pins. A pattern, subtle at first, began to emerge. The pins seemed to form a loose, fragmented constellation, But there was a central point, a kind of gravitational pull around the older, more historic parts of the city. "Look at this," Hayes announced to Miller and Thompson, pointing to the map. "The historical district. The older buildings, the art galleries, the small, independent studios. And the disappearances are always within a certain radius of these areas, or on routes leading to or from them." Thompson leaned in, his eyes narrowed. He's familiar with these areas. He knows the hidden alleys, the secluded spots, and the historical text. It ties into the artistic elements, the desire to leave a legacy. The task force shifted its focus, intensifying surveillance and patrols in the historical district. They interviewed local artists, gallery owners, and art students, showing them composite sketches based on vague witness descriptions: a tall, slender figure, often wearing a dark hat and coat, seen lurking near the scenes of disappearances. But the descriptions were too generic, too fleeting to be truly useful. Then a breakthrough, small but significant. A young art student, Sarah Chun, remembered a peculiar interaction she had with a man a few months prior. He had approached her at a local art fair, expressing an intense, almost obsessive interest in her technique for mixing pigments, particularly her use of cadmium red. He spoke with a quiet intensity, his eyes piercing, and he had an unusual scar, almost imperceptible, near his left ear. He identified himself as Arthur. She remembered him because he critiqued her work with a chillingly precise understanding of human anatomy, almost as if he was dissecting her paintings with medical instruments. Hayes seized on this. "Arthur, and the scar. It's not much, but it's more than we've had." They cross-referenced the name Arthur with known art enthusiasts, collectors, and artists in the Columbus area. The list was still long, but it was manageable. They also searched for anyone with a distinctive scar near their left ear. Days turned into agonizing nights. The team was exhausted, but the renewed hope pushed them forward. The Buckeye Ripper, meanwhile, continued his deadly dance. The next victim, a young musician named David Green, was found in a small, abandoned theater, his body meticulously propped up on the stage, a single, broken violin bow placed across his chest. The white feather was present again, this time tucked into the strings of a discarded violin. The symbolism of the feather, the theatrical nature of the crime scenes, the historical texts, the art fair conversation, it all began to coalesce in Hayes's mind. This wasn't just a killer, he was a performance artist of death. "He's not just killing them," Hayes declared to Miller and Thompson, her voice resonating with a sudden, chilling clarity. "He's turning them into exhibits. Each victim is a piece in his grand, macabre gallery." Thompson nodded slowly. "And the white feather. It's a common symbol for a writer, a poet, or a creative individual. A quill." Miller's eyes widened. "A writer? An artist?" Hayes pulled up a database of local artists, narrowing the search to those who worked with symbolism, who had a strong connection to history, or who displayed a morbid fascination in their work. One name, previously dismissed as an eccentric but harmless figure, now stood out with alarming clarity: Arthur Penhaligon. Penhaligon was a reclusive artist, known for his dark, often disturbing mixed-media installations. His art frequently explored themes of death, decay, and the human condition, often incorporating historical artifacts and anatomical studies. He lived in a dilapidated, sprawling Victorian house on the edge of the historical district, a house that, coincidentally, sat directly at the gravitational center of Hayes's mapped constellation of crime scenes. He was known to frequent local art fairs, sometimes offering critiques that were described as intense or unsettling, and he had a small, faded scar near his left ear, a result of a childhood accident, as detailed in an old newspaper clipping about a local art prize he'd won years ago. The description from Sarah Chun, the details of the scar, the art, the location, the name Arthur, it all clicked into place with horrifying precision. Penhaligon, Miller breathed, the name like a curse. He fits the profile perfectly. The intelligence, the artistic inclination, the reclusiveness. A search warrant was immediately drafted and approved. The task force, led by Miller and Hayes, with Agent Thompson providing tactical oversight, converged on Arthur Penhaligon's house under the cover of a moonless night. The house was a monument to decay, its paint peeling, its windows dark and forlorn. A faint, acrid smell, like turpentine and something else, something metallic, hung in the air. The team moved cautiously, their hearts pounding, the silence of the night broken only by the crunch of their boots on the gravel. They breached the front door, entering a mausoleum of twisted art and unsettling shadows. The interior was a labyrinth of dark corridors and cramped rooms, each filled with Penhaligon's macabre creations. Canvases depicting distorted human forms, sculptures crafted from bone and wire, and installations that incorporated dried flowers and antique medical instruments. It was a gallery of horrors, a direct reflection of a disturbed mind. In the dimly lit main studio, they found him. Arthur Penhaligon, a tall, slender man with piercing, intelligent eyes, was at an easel, meticulously applying a stroke of cadmium red paint to a canvas. On the canvas, a half-finished portrait, chillingly lifelike, of Emily Patterson, the librarian, complete with the white feather placed delicately on her forehead. He wore a dark smock, splattered with paint and, as they would later confirm, traces of human blood. He looked up as they entered, his expression calm, almost serene, a flicker of something akin to satisfaction in his eyes. He didn't resist. He simply laid down his brush, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on his lips. "It's about time," he said, his voice surprisingly soft, almost melodic. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't appreciate my work." Hayes felt a chill crawl up her spine. This wasn't just a killer. He was a psychopath, entirely devoid of remorse, convinced of the artistic merit of his heinous crimes. In the ensuing search of the house, the true horrors of Arthur Penhaligon's depravity were fully exposed. In a hidden, soundproof cellar, they discovered a meticulously organized collection of trophies, personal items taken from each victim, arranged with the same chilling precision as the bodies themselves. A silver locket, a cherished watch, a distinctive tie clip. Each item was catalogued, dated, and accompanied by a small, hand-drawn sketch of the victim's face, complete with the details of their staging. They also found a disturbing journal, filled with Penhaligon's florid, almost poetic musings on death, beauty, and the art of transformation. He described his victims not as people, but as canvases, his murders as performances, and the fear he instilled as his masterpiece. He saw himself not as a monster, but as a visionary, a misunderstood artist challenging the mundane boundaries of life and death. The unmasking of the Buckeye Ripper sent a seismic shockwave across the nation. Arthur Penhaligon, the reclusive artist, the seemingly harmless eccentric, was the monster who had terrorized Ohio. The news broke like a dam, a torrent of relief mixed with outrage and a lingering sense of disbelief. How could such evil hide in plain sight? As Penhaligon was led away, handcuffed and impassive, he turned his head slightly towards Hayes, a faint smile still on his lips. "You found me," he said, his voice a whisper. "But you haven't understood my art. You never will." Hayes, however, knew better. She had understood his art. She had understood the darkness that fueled it, the twisted logic that drove him. And though the capture brought a profound sense of relief, the chilling echo of Penhaligon's words reminded her that some evils, once unleashed, leave scars that run deeper than any artistic stroke. The phantom had been unmasked, but the true cost of his horrifying legacy was yet to be fully comprehended. The second act of this tragedy was complete, but the final, devastating curtain call still awaited. The arrest of Arthur Penhaligon, the man now universally known as the Buckeye Ripper, brought an immediate, palpable sigh of relief to Columbus and indeed, to the entire nation. The relentless fear that had gripped the community for months dissipated, replaced by a cautious return to normalcy. Yet, the scars of his reign of terror ran deep, etched into the collective psyche of the affected communities, and forever altering the lives of the victims' families. The unmasking was merely the end of the hunt. The true reckoning, the legal and emotional aftermath, was just beginning. The trial of Arthur Penhaligon became a national spectacle. Every major news network, every newspaper, every radio station dedicated endless hours and column inches to the details of his crimes, his chilling journal entries, and the macabre gallery he had maintained in his dilapidated home. The courtroom was packed daily, a morbid curiosity drawing spectators from across the country. The prosecution, led by a formidable district attorney, meticulously laid out the evidence. Forensic analysis of the cadmium red paint, matching DNA found on a discarded piece of clothing at one of the crime scenes, Sarah Chen's testimony, and most damning of all, Penhaligon's own journal, a twisted manifesto of his art. Penhaligon, represented by a court-appointed public defender, maintained a facade of detached intellectualism throughout the proceedings. He rarely spoke, and when he did, it was in calm, measured tones, often offering cryptic remarks about the nature of beauty, the subjective interpretation of art, and the limited understanding of the human condition by those who sought to judge him. He never expressed remorse, never offered an apology. His demeanor was one of a misunderstood genius, not a cold-blooded killer. He treated the trial not as a legal battle for his life, but as another stage for his twisted philosophy. Detective Miller and Hayes were key witnesses, their detailed testimonies painting a grim picture of the methodical nature of the Ripper's crimes. Hayes, in particular, delivered a powerful and emotionally charged account of her psychological profiling of Penhaligon, explaining how his artistic ambition intertwined with his homicidal compulsions. Her voice, though steady, conveyed the weight of the horrors she had uncovered. Agent Thompson, providing expert testimony on serial killer behavior, corroborated their findings, solidifying the prosecution's case. The victim impact statements were perhaps the most harrowing part of the trial. Family members, their voices trembling with grief and anger, spoke of their lost loved ones. The vibrant art student, the dedicated teacher, the loving mother, the brilliant historian. They spoke of the gaping void left in their lives, the nightmares that haunted their sleep, and the enduring fear that the Buckeye Ripper had inflicted. Each testimony was a poignant reminder that behind the sensational headlines and the macabre details, there were real lives, real families, shattered by unimaginable evil. Penhaligon listened to these testimonies with the same placid expression, occasionally making a note in a small leather-bound book he was permitted to keep. His apparent lack of emotion infuriated the victims' families, sparking outbursts of anger and cries for justice from the public gallery. The judge, a stoic and experienced jurist, struggled to maintain order amidst the raw emotional turmoil. After weeks of testimony, deliberations, and fervent public debate, the jury returned a verdict: guilty on all counts of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted in a mixture of cheers and sobs. For a moment, a collective sigh of relief filled the air. Justice, it seemed, had been served. The sentencing phase followed, swift and decisive. Arthur Penhaligon was sentenced to multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole, ensuring he would spend the rest of his days incarcerated, his art confined to the sterile walls of a maximum security prison. As the judge delivered the sentence, Penhaligon simply nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile once again playing on his lips, as if the entire process had merely been a formality, a minor inconvenience in his grander narrative. But the conclusion of the trial did not mean the end of the story. The Buckeye Ripper left an indelible mark on America. Columbus, once a symbol of Midwestern charm, was forever associated with the horrors of his crimes. The way people viewed their neighbors, the way they approached public safety, the very fabric of community trust, had been irrevocably altered. For Detective Miller, the case left him with a profound sense of weariness. He had brought the monster to justice, but the images of the crime scenes, the hollowed-out eyes of the victims' families, haunted his sleep. He retired a few years later, a quiet man seeking solace in fishing and the simpler rhythms of life, forever changed by the darkness he had witnessed. Detective Hayes, however, found renewed purpose. The Penhaligon case solidified her reputation as an exceptional investigator. She continued her career, rising through the ranks, her expertise in criminal psychology becoming an invaluable asset to countless other complex cases. Yet, The ghost of Arthur Penhaligon, his calm eyes and chilling smile, would occasionally surface in her thoughts, a stark reminder of the sophisticated evil that could lurk beneath an unassuming facade. She became a strong advocate for deeper psychological profiling in law enforcement, pushing for a more nuanced understanding of the criminal mind. The victims' families embarked on a long, arduous journey of healing. Support groups formed, helping them navigate the complex grief, anger, and trauma. Many became vocal advocates for victims' rights, ensuring that the memory of their loved ones would not be defined solely by the horrific way they died, but by the lives they lived and the impact they had. Their resilience in the face of such profound loss became a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit. Arthur Penhaligon himself became a subject of intense academic study. Criminologists, psychologists, and sociologists dissected his journal, his art, and his case, attempting to understand the origins of his depravity. His name became synonymous with the chilling intersection of artistic expression and homicidal mania, a cautionary tale whispered in the annals of true crime. He occasionally received letters in prison, from a mix of morbid admirers, confused students, and those seeking to understand the artist behind the crimes. He responded to none, maintaining his reclusive silence, a final act of control. Years turned into decades. The physical evidence of the Buckeye Ripper's reign faded, but the echoes of his legacy remained. Documentaries were produced, books were written, and podcasts delved into the minutiae of his crimes. Each retelling served as a chilling reminder of the fragility of safety and the pervasive nature of evil. The white feather and cadmium red became morbid symbols, understood by those who remembered the terror. The story of the Buckeye Ripper is not just a tale of a serial killer. It is a profound examination of how a single individual's depravity can shatter communities, challenge law enforcement, and leave an indelible mark on the national consciousness. It is a story that reminds us of the importance of vigilance, the relentless pursuit of justice, and the enduring strength of those who fight for it. It is a testament to the fact that even in the most prosperous and seemingly peaceful of places, the shadow of darkness can lurk, waiting for its moment to emerge, leaving behind a legacy that continues to resonate long after the last verdict has been read. And so, the grim tale of the Buckeye Ripper concludes, a chapter in American history, etched in blood and fear, a story that reminds us that even when the monster is caged, the echoes of his deeds can linger, shaping our perceptions and reminding us of the ever-present struggle between light and shadow.